The story of modern Turkey cannot be separated from the legacy of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. He was the founder of the Republic of Turkey and its first president. He built upon the ashes of the Ottoman Empire and started an ambitious project to transform Turkey into a modern, secular, and industrialized nation-state. His reforms, collectively known today as Kemalism, touched every aspect of Turkish society, be it politics, culture, education, the economy, or religion. Yet, these sweeping changes were not without controversy. They sparked resistance, debate, and at times repression. This video explores Ataturk's reforms, their impact on Turkish society, and the challenges they faced, including the Kurdish question, the role of women, and the suppression of dissent. The Ottoman Empire was partitioned by the Allied powers after defeat in the First World War and left its heartland vulnerable to occupation. It was in this atmosphere of crisis that Mustafa Kemal, a military officer, emerged as a leader of the Turkish War of Independence. His victory against foreign forces and the subsequent establishment of the Republic of Turkey in 1923 marked the beginning of a new era. Ataturk's vision for Turkey was clear. He wanted to create a modern, secular, and Western-oriented nation-state. He believed that the survival and progress of Turkey depended on breaking away from its Ottoman and religious past. This vision would guide his reforms over the next decade and a half. One of the most significant aspects of Ataturk's reforms was the push for Westernization. He sought to align Turkey with the cultural and political norms of Europe, viewing this as necessary for modernization. This effort was most visible in the adoption of Western dress, the Latin alphabet, and the Gregorian calendar. In 1925, the hat law banned traditional headgear like the fez, which was seen as a symbol of the old order, and encouraged Western-style hats and clothing instead. The same year, the Islamic calendar was replaced with the Gregorian calendar, and in 1928, the Arabic script was replaced with a modified Latin alphabet. The script reform was a part of a broader effort to modernize Turkey, promote literacy, and align the country with the Western world. It also served as a tool to redefine what it meant to be Turkish, moving away from the multi-ethnic Islamic identity of the Ottoman Empire towards a secular and homogeneous nation-state. Reformers argued that the Perso-Arabic script used in the Ottoman Empire lacked vowels. It made it difficult to read and write Turkish accurately, they claimed. As a result, literacy rates in the Ottoman Empire were low, with estimates suggesting that only 10% of the population could read and write by the early 20th century. This low literacy rate was seen as a major obstacle for modernization and progress. Moreover, the Arabic script was closely associated with the Islamic and Ottoman heritage that Ataturk sought to move away from. The Ottoman Empire had been a theocratic state where religion and governance were intertwined, and the Arabic script was a symbol of that connection. Ataturk believed that Turkey needed to break free from its Islamic and Ottoman past in order to become a modern and secular nation-state. Ataturk announced the adoption of a new Turkish alphabet based on the Latin script. The new alphabet was designed to be phonetic, with each letter representing a specific sound in the Turkish language. This made it much easier to learn and use, especially for children and adults who had never learned to read or write before. The reform was implemented rapidly and decisively. Ataturk himself traveled across the country, teaching the new alphabet to crowds and emphasizing its importance for Turkey's future. The transition was not without challenges. Books, newspapers, and official documents had to be rewritten in the new script overnight. Schools were tasked with teaching the new alphabet, and public campaigns were launched to promote literacy. Despite the difficulties, the reform was remarkably successful. Within a few years, literacy rates began to rise significantly, and the new alphabet became a unifying symbol of the modern Turkish nation. The reform also had important implications for Turkey's cultural and intellectual life. The new alphabet made it easier to translate Western literature and scientific works into Turkish. This facilitated the exchange of ideas and knowledge. It also allowed for the development of a distinct Turkish literary and linguistic identity, free from the influence of Arabic and Persian, which had dominated Ottoman Turkish. Ataturk's government promoted the study of pre-Islamic Turkish history and culture, emphasizing the idea that the Turkish nation had a rich and independent heritage that predated the Ottoman Empire. Ataturk's cultural vision was summed up in the slogan, "How happy is the one who says, I am a Turk." The new alphabet played a crucial role in this project by providing a common linguistic framework that united the population. However, this emphasis on Turkish nationalism also had exclusionary consequences. Minority languages, such as Kurdish, were suppressed, and the use of non-Turkish scripts were banned. The government promoted the idea that Turkey was a nation of Turks, and other identities were seen as threats to national unity. This policy of assimilation created tensions, particularly within the Kurdish population, who resisted efforts to erase their language and culture. In the Ottoman Empire, Islam was deeply intertwined with the state. The Sultan was not only a political leader but also the Caliph, the spiritual leader of the Muslim world. The empire's legal system was based on Islamic law, and religious institutions played a central role in education, justice, and social life. The millet system, which granted limited autonomy to religious communities, further reinforced the idea that identity and governance were to be rooted in religion. This system, while effective in managing a multi-ethnic and multi-religious empire, came to be seen by Ataturk as incompatible with the needs of a modern nation-state. He believed that the Ottoman over-reliance on religion had contributed to the empire's decline, and that Turkey's survival depended on embracing secularism and Western-style modernization. Perhaps the most radical of Ataturk's reforms was the formal secularization of the state. In 1924, the caliphate was abolished and religious courts were closed. The new constitution declared Turkey a secular republic, thereby separating religion from the state. Religious education was curtailed, and Islamic institutions were brought under state control. Sufi dervish lodges and religious brotherhoods were banned in 1925, which had played a significant role in Ottoman society. These measures were aimed at reducing the influence of religion in public life and encouraging a secular national identity. Ataturk's secularism was not anti-religious in the sense of seeking to eliminate religion altogether. Rather, it sought to confine religion to the private sphere, where it would be a matter of personal belief rather than public policy. This approach was reflected in the Kemalist principle that emphasized the neutrality of the state in religious matters. However, this neutrality was often enforced in ways that marginalized religious expression. Public displays of religiosity, such as wearing religious attire, were discouraged, and the government promoted a secular lifestyle as the ideal for modern Turkish citizens. Ataturk himself was a symbol of this new secular identity, usually appearing in Western clothing and emphasizing the importance of science and reason over tradition and superstition. Ataturk's vision for Turkey also included economic modernization. He believed that industrialization was key to achieving national independence and prosperity. The state took an active role in economic development, establishing state-owned enterprises and investing in infrastructure. The first five-year industrial plan, launched in 1934, focused on developing industries such as textiles, mining, and steel production. Railways were expanded to connect the country and facilitate trade. However, these efforts faced significant challenges. Turkey's economy was predominantly agricultural, and the transition to industrialization was slow. The global economic depression of the 1930s further complicated matters. Despite these obstacles, Ataturk's economic policies laid the foundation for Turkey's future industrial growth. Ataturk's reforms also sought to create a unified national identity. The Ottoman Empire had been a multi-ethnic and multi-religious state, but the new Republic of Turkey emphasized Turkish nationalism. The 1924 constitution declared that all citizens were Turks, regardless of their ethnic or linguistic background. This policy aimed to promote a sense of unity and loyalty to the state. However, this approach was to have profound implications for Turkey's Kurdish population. The Kurds, who had long sought greater autonomy, were seen as a threat to national identity. Kurdish identity was suppressed, and the use of the Kurdish language, traditional dress, and cultural practices was restricted. Rebellions such as the Sheikh Said Rebellion in 1925 and the Dersim Rebellion in 1937 were met with harsh repression. The Kurdish question remains one of the most contentious issues in Turkish politics to this day. Ataturk's reforms also addressed the role of women in society. He believed that the modernization of Turkey required the emancipation of women. In 1926, the new civil code abolished polygamy and granted women equal rights in marriage, divorce, and inheritance. Women gained the right to vote in municipal elections in 1930 and in national elections in 1934, making Turkey one of the first countries in the world to grant women full political rights. Educational reforms also played a crucial role in advancing women's rights. Ataturk emphasized the importance of education for both boys and girls, and schools were established across the country. Women began to enter professions previously dominated by men, such as law, medicine, and politics. These changes marked a significant shift in gender relations, though traditional attitudes persisted in many areas. Ataturk encouraged women to adopt Western-style clothing, which he associated with progress and civilization. The traditional Islamic veil was seen as part of the Ottoman past and as an obstacle to women's participation in public life. While the veil was never officially banned, it was strongly discouraged, and women who embraced Western attire were celebrated as embodiments of the new modern Turkey. In urban centers, women began wearing dresses, skirts, and hats, reflecting the influence of European fashion. The shift was not just about clothing. It was part of a larger effort to redefine gender roles and promote women's visibility and participation in society. However, the reforms were unevenly adopted, with rural areas and conservative communities usually resisting these changes. Despite this, the evolution of women's dress under Kemalism remains a lasting symbol of Turkey's transformation and the complex interplay between tradition and modernity. While Ataturk's reforms were transformative, they were not universally welcomed. The pace and scope of change alienated many, particularly those who felt that their cultural and religious identities were under attack. The closure of Sufi lodges, the suppression of Kurdish identity, and the imposition of secularism sparked resistance. Ataturk's government responded to dissent with a heavy hand. Political opposition was tightly controlled and critics were mostly silenced. The establishment of a single-party state under the Republican People's Party left little room for pluralism. The independence tribunals, established during the War of Independence, were used to persecute opponents of the regime. While Ataturk's reforms were driven by a vision of progress, they were also marked by authoritarianism. Religious leaders who resisted these changes were silenced, and uprisings like the Sheikh Said Rebellion in 1925, which combined Kurdish nationalism and religious grievances, were met with brutal military force. The Kurdish population sought greater cultural and political autonomy, but faced severe repression under Ataturk's policies of Turkish nationalism. Kurdish identity was systematically marginalized. The use of the Kurdish language, traditional dress, and cultural expressions were banned, and Kurdish inhabited regions were subjected to military campaigns and forced resettlement. One of the most significant Kurdish uprisings, the Dersim Rebellion in 1937 and 1938, was crushed with violence and resulted in thousands of deaths and widespread displacement. These repressive measures brought home the authoritarian nature of Kemalist reforms, which prioritized national unity and secularism over cultural diversity and dissent. The Kemalist attitude towards religion and legitimacy represented a dramatic break from the Ottoman past and a bold attempt to redefine Turkish identity. While it succeeded in creating a secular state, it also left unresolved questions about the role of religion in public life and the balance between tradition and modernity. Today, while he is officially celebrated, the legacy of Ataturk's reforms remains a central and challenging part of Turkish national identity. The Kurdish question, the role of religion in public life, and the balance between secularism and tradition remain central issues in Turkish politics. Ataturk's vision of a unified, Western-oriented Turkey continues to inspire and divide. His reforms were a revolution of modernity, but they also sowed the seeds of ongoing debates around identity, democracy, and the future of the nation.